isn't about cuts anymore. This is about a fundamental change in the situation of ordinary people. They are trying to make a fundamental shift of wealth from the poor to the rich, right? And they will not stop unless we stop them. That's what austerity is about. It's not needed, it's ideological. The reason why they're destroying education, health, the reason why they're destroying everything that all of us hold dear is because they want their money back. That's what they want. They want the wealth, and they want us to work for longer and for less, and if they have to use division and nasty racism in order to make sure we don't hit back, then they'll use it. We have to be really clear. The second thing is we are now living in very interesting times. What is it, 2 weeks ago, the Panama Papers came out that exposed how disgusting it is that the wealthy are sticking their wealth away on offshore islands. It seems like it was years ago now, because every day there is another huge crisis, whether it's local election results, an attempt to stir up the argument that the Labour Party is anti-Semitic, whether it's the row now that's going on inside the Tory party about the EU. I mean, let's look at them. They hate each other. They absolutely bloody hate each other. You've got Boris Johnson and David Cameron. These people are ripping themselves to pieces over the issue of Europe, and the only way they can think about gaining popularity is to blame the most oppressed parts of society. Blame the refugees, scapegoat Muslims. Vote for us, because if you vote for us to stay in or to go out, then we'll make sure that we throw out those people who are fleeing war and poverty and perhaps drown as a result of it and stuff. That'll be the result. These people are disgusting, but they are really in it for keeps. And therefore we have to think about what's going on in the world around us. The bloke called Tony Cliff, who was one of the people who set up the SWP a long time ago, he used to talk about the world looking a bit like it was in the 1930s in slow motion. It don't look like it's in slow motion anymore. Think about some of the things that have been talked about tonight. In Austria, a fascist came within a handful of votes of being elected. Donald Trump, and we want all of us, should say a prayer here, right? Donald Trump could be president of the United States, right, around this. We look at the Front National in France and the rest of it. These are the terrible sides of things. The other side of it, people said, the idea of Bernie Sanders can go out and call himself a socialist in America and get tens of thousands of people coming to rallies and stuff. The fact you can get a revolutionary socialist on a very funny Skype link, right, stuff, but speaking to us tonight as a TD from Ireland and stuff about it, it shows you the potential in the situation, both for hope and despair. Look at what's happening in France. I talk about the Front National, the power of ordinary workers and students who are on the streets, on the picket line, now trying to fight back against attempts to attack their conditions and the rest of it. Actually, what we're seeing is the world is in the balance at the moment, right? And there is a lot for all of us globally, but also at every level, right? What the outcome of this fight is going to depend on the kind of world that we live in and our kids grow up in. And it's in that light you have to see what's happened with Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party, because the election of Jeremy Corbyn and the wave of hope that's developed, right, stuff around it, is part of that radicalisation. It's part of the fact that for hundreds of thousands of people, they are sick of year after year being told we've just got to put up with austerity like it was the weather. And actually the love affair that at one stage the Labour Party had with the free market and the rest of it, it's a brilliant thing that you've got Corbyn and John McDonnell. For example, I turned up at the picket line a few weeks ago in Barnet, in a very sort of about rainy part of London and stuff, at 6 o'clock in the morning. I turn round and there's a Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer standing next to me. This don't normally happen, trust me, if you're in a picket line, it don't normally happen. So under that basis, why have we got the cheek to stand up here and first of all say we haven't joined the Labour Party, and secondly have the audacity to ask you to join the Socialist Workers' Party if you haven't? Why is it we can say that when the advances we've had over the last couple of months? And I want to explain why. Because first of all, we celebrate what's happening. We're on the same side as Jeremy Corbyn, McDonnell, and everybody who wants to see change. But the question really is about how do we beat back austerity in the end, and how do we talk about winning a more progressive society and hopefully a socialist society? The first thing is, someone said it, we can't wait till 2020. We all know that, because there will be nothing left. I mean, you think about that strike that just been talked about in the colleges. Our kids have already been priced out. Our students have already been priced out of universities. If you're a working class student, you're 40, 50 grand in debt by the time you get out. They're going to take the cap off. It won't be £9,000 anymore. It'll be 10,000, 12,000, 15,000. Working class kids won't go to university. It'll be a thing of the past. In other words, they're trying to drive this stuff back to the 30s. And at every level, Conway spoke and stuff from the junior doctors, the teacher who spoke, and the rest of it. This is what they're doing. So we can't wait. That's one thing. The second thing is, if you want to make sure that both the press, the Tories, the right-wing press, and actually the Parliamentary Labour Party doesn't throw Jeremy Corbyn out and stuff about it, what's his best ally in this situation? It's us. It's the mass movement. It's the people on the streets. It's the people in the workplaces. It's people who are campaigning against racism and the rest of it. Why is that? Because where's Corbyn weakest? In bloody Parliament. Because he ain't got no friends in Parliament. 20 MPs tried to get him elected. Actually, where are his friends? His friends are on the demonstrations. They were on strike today. They're the teachers who are fighting against academisation and the rest of it. But there is a bigger question. And the bigger question is, can you use the present setup in order to produce socialism? And we see this in a small way in local councils. When your local councillors are elected, they don't always do it because they just want to make cuts. They probably want to make the world better. The problem is they get in the council chamber and they are trapped. That is a real problem. And the big question then comes: can you get elected and use the state machine, use the parliamentary system to produce socialism? If you want, I know these people are principled people, and Amy spoke about what happened in Greece. I don't believe that the Syriza government was elected because they wanted to make cuts. They were elected because they wanted to smash austerity. But the problem came when the Greek people voted for that government. Who didn't listen to the vote? A lot of people talk about democracy. The people who didn't listen to the vote was the EU, the IMF, the European Central Bank and the rest of it, because who was in power in that situation? It wasn't the Syriza government, it was the bloody unelected bankers and unelected bureaucrats and unelected politicians, and those people used their power to smash that government. So you get the crazy setup now of a socialist government sending the police in to smash up a refugee camp where 10,000 refugees are. That's the logic of a system that tries to break anybody who tries to use the parliamentary system. Is it just Greece? Well, it's not just Greece. The comrade spoke in the past. There were historical lessons about that. In Chile back in the 70s, a government under a man called Allende, who was a very principled socialist, a fighter for social change. Allende was killed by the military. They had stuff. There was a coup against the government, a socialist government and stuff around. There's a famous picture of Allende, who was the president of Chile, wearing a steel helmet and carrying an armour light, right, and stuff. In other words, he fought to the end in a presidential palace, but it wasn't the case that the ruling class in Chile just said, okay, you've been elected, that's okay then. Is that just something that happens in other countries? Well, just think back about a couple of months now, when Jeremy Corbyn said that the Labour Party might think A, about getting rid of Trident, and B, getting rid of NATO. There was an unnamed general, if people remember this, who then appeared and made quotes in the national newspapers, who said that if it comes down to a Labour government trying to get rid of NATO or Trident, stuff about it, we will not put up with it. We will not put up with it. And the last time a Labour government was elected in this country on a radical-ish programme back in 1974, what happened to that government? The employers went on investment strike, money flooded out of the country, they did anything they could to destabilise that government. And don't think that in this day and age, with our ruling class, people who are bathed in blood and racism, they wouldn't do the same thing to a Labour government. Because the real point is, where does power really lie? And when you get in that parliamentary chamber, power really lies in this society, in the unelected bosses, in the unelected bankers, in the unelected police chiefs, and the unelected army officers, in that whole section of society. All the real decisions are made outside our democratic control. The truth is, if voting worked, they would probably abolish it, right, around it. And this is one of the questions that we have to try and raise. Where does our power lie, though? Well, our power, we are a powerful group of people, working class people. Sometimes you feel you've got no power at all. Then think about yesterday and beginning today in Manchester, when 2,500 bus workers went on strike and worked for First. Were they powerless? They weren't. You try and get anywhere in Manchester during the process about it. In other words, right, stuff, we're the people who run the schools, we're the people who keep the NHS going, we're the people who drive the banks, we are the people who make the absolutely astonishing profits that are made in this country. This is the 5th richest country on the face of the earth. You wouldn't believe it when you walk down my way and you see people now literally sleeping in the gutters, right, and stuff in the area where I live about and stuff around. But we make that wealth, and we have the power, potentially, the power to use something to make a better society. Today in London, it was interesting. There was 1,000 steelworkers marching through central London. There were bursary students and stuff, student nurses who were protesting in Parliament. There were college lecturers and students marching. You could see the potential to try to bring back the resistance that exists in this country. I just want to finish by saying a couple of last things, really. See, the SWP wants to work with anybody, right, who wants to fight back and see a progressive, modern society. We work in every campaign, people know that by the nature of it and stuff. You all see the SWP at this demo, on this campaign, and all the rest of it, right, and stuff about it. But we are a different kind of organisation. See, the thing is about an organisation like the Labour Party, you can be a brilliant individual inside the Labour Party. There are lots of great class fighters inside the Labour Party. The problem with it is the electoral pressure, right, and stuff on the Labour Party pressurises people as if a certain stage is too compromised. It pressurises to try not to take the difficult stand at different stages because it could lose votes. Think actually of Jeremy Corbyn's face when he made the speech about the EU exit, right, and stuff about it. It was the least convincing speech he's made because he's not convinced about the argument, but he thought it was a vote loser to do the opposite. We want to have an organisation that is prepared to say the difficult thing, that is prepared to stand alongside the Muslim community when they're baited by the press at any level, because we will not allow our class to be divided by the press or the Tories or anybody else. It's prepared to stand by refugees at every level. People have to remember, it's brilliant what's going on in this country at the minute, but it hasn't always been popular to argue that. It's only because socialists make a stand and start to try and pull people round them that it makes a big difference. Last thing of all, really, is the question of revolution. It's a terrifying word. Revolution, we agree with lots of things that said, but then they talked about revolution, right, something like that. What do we mean when we talk about revolution? Right, revolution, right, stuff, is a process that actually means that we're going to, one, try and use the power we've got to fundamentally challenge the system, but secondly, right, stuff about it, we want to create a society that has genuine democracy. Karl Marx talked about revolutions getting rid of the muck of ages. What they mean about that is, one, getting rid of the horrors of the society we now live in, but also changing us. How many times have all of us felt, well, I'm not going to say anything, man, because people aren't really interested in what I've got to say, or I don't feel confident enough? Because all the time you're told when you're working class that you're rubbish, you're useless, you're stupid. Right? But actually what you find in a room like this is when people get up, they are articulate, they are imaginative, right? So they're the sort of things that should be a building block of a new society. That's what we mean by a revolutionary process. And when you talk about what kind of party then we think we need, and that's why we want to argue with people to join the SWP about it, we want a political party that brings together as many as possible of the best fighters, the most committed fighters, the mouthy ones at work or college, the ones who stand up and say no, and other people come round, and you know the one they all laugh about when they go into the tea room or sing again, but the person they look to in your workplace and stuff. That's what the SWP is. It's an organisation of leaders. There ain't no rank and file in the SWP. In other parties, there are party leaders who get elected at conference and get up and speak and the rest of it. There's no leaders in the SWP. What there is a party of leaders, a party of working class people that are prepared to stand up for their own people, for their own class, absolutely on a principled basis, whether that makes you popular or at times unpopular and stuff. It's about creating an organisation. The Russian Revolution leader Lenin called it a combat party. Sounds a bit grandiose, but in other words, it's a party that debates, has democratic discussion, and then gets things done. And if we're going to not look back in 5 or 10 years' time and look at the young children growing up and stuff and actually tell them, oh, I'm sorry, you can't have a hospital treatment, you can't go to university, you can't afford even go to a bloody decent secondary school, right, and stuff about it because it now costs too much, right? We need a party of fighters. Yes, we need to work alongside it with broadest possible alliances against austerity, but we need a party who's going to concentrate on where our power lies, and that means concentrating on the power that ordinary working class people have in their workplaces, in their communities, in their colleges. That's the kind of power that eventually can get rid of austerity but bring about a world that hasn't got racism, hasn't got war, and what we're talking about is bringing about a socialist society.